Welcome to the Frequently Made Mistakes for Assignment 3A. First and foremost, as always, make sure to comment and format your code properly. Otherwise, you'll lose points unnecessarily. Here's an example of a small, not really a bug, just something to be aware of. You don't actually have to put fork join task here in the generic portion of the new unsynchronized array object creation. You can just use this empty diamond and the compiler will deduce the appropriate type. So it's just better to get in that habit. This method is way too complicated. It's much simpler than this. You just have to create an instance of the appropriate class that's defined below, that subclasses from recursive task. There's a number of problems that people had trying to figure out the return values in the URL crawler task compute method. This particular implementation makes no sense whatsoever because it's calling join and it's not returning the value and storing it, and you're not supposed to return images on page being the number of items you fork. That has nothing to do with the actual count of the number of images on the page, so that really makes no sense. Make sure that you put the appropriate generic type here. I'll let you figure out what that is. It's pretty obvious if you take a look at the code and the examples, but you need to make sure you put something there. Don't just leave it like this. And if you fix that problem, then you won't have to do a cast here. A similar problem down here, once again, forks.size is the wrong value for the number of images on the page. And once again, images on page needs to be incremented properly by using the value that comes back from join. Remember, all these tasks are recursive tasks, so they're going to actually get a return value back, which in some cases is an integer, in some cases is an image. Once again, make sure that you put in the appropriate generic type here. And this is another good example of incorrectly incrementing images on page. You have to use the return value that comes back from join rather than just unilaterally incrementing images on page by one. That will give you the wrong values. And I'm surprised that this would have passed the tests. So make sure you run the tests as well. Same problem here. This again is incorrect. Don't use forks.size as a number of transformed images. Notice we're now in process image task as opposed to URL crawler task. But once again, this is the wrong thing to do, and you need to use the return value from join. Down here, yet again, make sure that you give the appropriate generic type here. And also, don't just unilaterally increment transformed images by one. You have to check to see whether or not join returns a non-null image. Again, that should also have been something that would have been caught by the tests. Now we're in perform transform task. As we talked about in class the other day, this isn't really a bug. It's just a good habit to get into. Rather than declaring a local variable and then immediately returning that variable, just go ahead and return the result of calling apply transform. Here's another example. In this particular case, it's the same. This is actually a slightly different problem. In this particular case, you actually, I think this is not the actual problem. I think this is the original problem was it looked like this. This is the actual code here. In this particular case, you need to actually store the result into image. This is what it should look like. This is the original code that people wrote that was wrong. You have to make sure that you're taking the result of apply transform and returning that. So this code here is returning the untransformed image. So that's basically a summary of the mistakes. Most people did pretty well, so this shouldn't take you much time to fix. And we'll be putting out the new version of the skeletons for assignment 3B shortly.